It's one of the most beloved orchestral works of all time, the classic story of the young girl Clara who on Christmas Eve takes a hit of her godfather's magic fairy dust and proceeds to spend the night having visions of battles between toy soldiers and mice, of a parade of dancing desserts, and, of course, falling madly in love with her favorite toy. Hey, we've all been there. So if it's such a classic, why did the composer struggle so mightily to finish it? And why did it take so long for this piece to enter the standard ballet repertoire? Find out as we explore Tchaikovsky's final ballet, The Nutcracker. Even if you've never been to an orchestra concert in your life, you know The Nutcracker. In the holiday season, the characteristic dances like the Trepak, the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy, or the Waltz of the Flowers are absolutely everywhere. They're on the radio, they're in movies and TV shows and commercials, they're on the music at the mall, to say nothing of the concert hall. But as magical and wonderful as these selections are, they're actually not my favorite part of the Nutcracker. But we'll get to that in a moment. First, here's a little bit more about the piece. Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky was the leading Russian composer of the 19th century. He was famous for his symphonies, his operas, his concertos, and many more pieces. So in 1890, when the Imperial Ballet Theatre at the Mariinsky Theatre in St. Petersburg wanted to commission a new ballet, naturally they went to him. They only want the best. The new commission was to be based on the 1816 story by E.T.A. Hoffmann called The Nutcracker and the Mouse King, as adapted by the Frenchman Alexandre Dumas in 1845. Tchaikovsky loved this story, so he eagerly accepted the commission. It was to be part of a double bill together with another newly composed opera called Iolanta. So in February of 1891, Tchaikovsky received the scenario for the ballet from the choreographer Marius Petipa. And this was a very detailed scenario, which went so far as to give precisely the number of bars in precisely the tempos that the ballet master wanted. So Tchaikovsky got to work. Normally he was a pretty fast composer, pretty fast worker, but in this case it dragged on for months and months. In April he wasn't anywhere near complete, and so he was about to depart on a trip to New York, and he asked for an extension. Could it be postponed till the following season? Right at this point, he hadn't even started work on the opera that he was supposed to also complete at that time. And he was granted that extension. So why was he having so much trouble composing the ballet? Well, part of it, one has to admit, may be because of the scenario. Now, Tchaikovsky loved the story by E.T.A. Hoffmann, but the scenario for the ballet only really follows it halfway through. The first act has got the story. You've got the godfather, Drosselmeyer, who's an inventor. He brings these crazy mechanical toys, including the Nutcracker that all the children fall in love with. And he's got the toys coming to life. He's got the visions of the battle. And they go off to a place called Konfiturenberg at the end of Act 1, which is the Kingdom of Sweets. All so far, so good. The problem really comes in, and I think the weakness of this ballet is in the second act, which, even though it's got beautiful music, the scenario really doesn't do anything. It's just a parade of dances. There's no plot, there's no story. So it's kind of like half of a story and half of just sort of a nothing. And I think Tchaikovsky struggled with this as well. But there's another reason why he was having difficulty, and that is in the early April of 1891, he learned of the death of his sister Alexandra. He had been very close to her, and in fact, he had spent many of his summers together with her and her family, and he loved playing with her children, and he loved to compose on her country estate. So this death hit him very hard, and it was a couple of months before he was really up to the task of composing. Also, he left in the end of April on a trip to New York, where he was going to be on the program of the opening concert at Carnegie Hall. So with all these interruptions, he didn't get to actually completing the ballet until the summer, and he finally finished the short score in July. What's a short score, you ask? Well, fortunately, I've done a video on that, and you can find the link right here. And after this, he wrote the opera next, and then he did the orchestration for the piece the following winter in January through March, roughly speaking, of 1892. And during this time, he also extracted an orchestral suite. In fact, the orchestral suite was premiered first, and it was a smash hit. It was a big success and has been a staple of the concert hall ever since. So there was a lot of excitement about the premiere of the ballet. But the premiere of the ballet didn't go nearly as well, and perhaps because of this problem with the scenario, perhaps because of problems with the dancers, it just wasn't a big hit, and it took almost 75 years before it was really taken up by choreographers like Georges Balanchine for the New York City Ballet, who put together new versions after World War II that really captured the attention of the public, and ever since then, the ballet has been everywhere at holiday time. In fact, a lot of companies in North America get a substantial portion of their budget for the whole year just from the ticket sales they get from the Nutcracker. Now let's talk a little bit about the music. I'm not going to talk much about the characteristic dances because we know those so well, but I will say that one of the things that makes the Nutcracker so great is the way that Tchaikovsky uses orchestral color. For example, he used a brand new instrument called the celesta, which looks a little bit like a piano, but it sounds like bells. And this was very famously used in the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. It's the same instrument, also conveying a sense of magic, that John Williams used in the score to begin Harry Potter more than a century later. Another thing that Tchaikovsky does in this score is he uses a lot of references to folk melody. For example, in Act 1, he's got an Austrian folk dance called the Großvatertanz, the grandfather dance. And there's another bit of music in there that comes from a French folk song called Giroflée, Girofla. That's in the second act. In the first act, there's one called Bon Voyage, Monsieur Dumoulin. And also in the second act, there's another French tune called Cadet Roussel, and other references abound as well. In addition to this, though, I wanted to talk about two particularly beautiful moments that are my favorite moments in the ballet. And the first of these comes at the end of Act 1, and this is the first pas de deux that comes right after the battle between the toy soldiers and the mice, which the Nutcracker has been turned back into the form of a prince. Clara and he are falling in love. And this music is absolutely vintage Tchaikovsky. It's just soaring and beautiful. Let's take a listen. Now let's listen to this next excerpt, which comes from Act 2. This is also a section of music called a pas de deux. This is a grand pas de deux. This is the culmination in terms of choreography of the whole ballet. And for this moment, there's an interesting story. It's a legend that one of Tchaikovsky's friends made a bet or a dare that Tchaikovsky couldn't write an emotional melody that was just a simple major scale. And Tchaikovsky said ascending or descending, and the friend said descending, and Tchaikovsky said, all right, well, here you go, and came up with the following. We don't know if it's true, but it's a great story. Listen to this music. Where does music like that come from? Well, it's a bit of speculation, but I think it's safe to say that this music was at least partly inspired by the death of Tchaikovsky's sister. You can hear this sense of melancholy and tragedy and sadness underneath this. And in fact, This emotional depth, the way that Tchaikovsky was able to write music of this depth, even in a piece like The Nutcracker, which is essentially a children's tale and very happy and upbeat. This is why we love Tchaikovsky so much. This is why we still listen to his music so faithfully more than 100 years after he died. Ironically, Tchaikovsky didn't think much of The Nutcracker. In fact, he wrote to a friend that he thought was far inferior to his previous ballet, The Sleeping Beauty. But whatever his misgivings may have been about the piece, there's no question that the result was absolutely inspired and he had created a masterpiece. So what do you think? Do you think Tchaikovsky actually wrote that melody from the Pas de Deux on a dare from a friend? And what's your favorite part of The Nutcracker? Is there another piece that you'd like to see me cover in a future Notes from the Podium? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and do all the YouTube things, all the things. My name is Daniel Black. Thanks for watching.